Is polygamy possible or even worth it for Kenyan Americans, especially those who are planning to return or those who have already returned? Does it happen? And if so, why and how? For more on these questions, join me for the next 10 minutes or so. I'm going to spend a little bit of time exploring this thing that keeps popping up through the comment section. And hopefully, I'll share something that might be of interest to people who are just curious. I know many folks who are watching or listening to me are not polygamous, but I'm also certain that a lot of the folks who are watching me have lived the polygamous life, especially through their grandparents or great grandparents. So I'm going to share some of the insights I've picked up having spent quite a bit of time around Kenyan Americans and how this happens and why, so that hopefully folks have a better understanding of what it is. Hopefully, folks are going to be less judgmental. And if there's something I miss, as I always say, please feel free to share your thoughts that may be different than mine. But before we do that, again, good evening, family. Welcome to Karateng. It's a village in Kisumu in Western Kenya. This is our home. We are trying to make it as comfortable as possible. And today we have almost the entire crew. We might be missing a few folks, but we have almost the entire crew here. And many of us Kenyans or other folks in other parts of the world have some kind of traditions or rituals attached to festive seasons. And for us, one of the things we've kept for more than 40 years as a family is the traditional photo shoot. A long time ago, as a kid, I remember they used to bring like a photo man who would come one day out of the year to take pictures, and he would be riding his bicycle with a Kodak film. They take pictures and then they go to quote unquote wash them and all that stuff. So we've almost just digitized the process as we've gotten older. So as you can see in this video, we are doing everything to replicate this tradition. To create our little paradise, something that our kids can hold on to. Because most of the Christmas traditions for us are gone, except for something like this. So yes, we religiously do this photo shoot every single year around festive season or thereabout. So in this video, as you can tell, this photo session, we just bring up everybody and we just take random pictures, different groups. We are switching back and forth, so nothing really special. But as you watch all of this, there's always a little bit of drama. You might need to pay more attention to see some of that. So I'm going to show you this photo session for the next 10 minutes or so while I talk about this issue of polygamy that keeps popping up in some of our discussions. So if you're joining us for the first time, welcome to our channel. We talk about all kinds of issues that are relevant to African returnees, especially people who are returning to Kenya. Many of our conversations revolve around construction issues, real estate, investments, and even the process of returning to Africa. What does it take to prepare for eventual return? And of course, on occasion, we switch it up and venture into social issues like the one I'm about to handle today. So today, we'll focus on one social issue that is not necessarily new, but is really gaining prominence among Kenyan Americans, particularly folks who've been gone for a little while. Now, polygamy is something that I have both lived experience with it because my grandfather had multiple wives, but I've also observed from afar because I only have one wife. So I'm going to share my limited experience based on that background. But in general, again, if you're a regular watcher, you know we offer consultation services on issues to do with the same issues I've talked about: real estate, investment, construction, and all that. So if you need our help, again, hit me up. If I can't help, we'll find somebody who can help. So without further ado, let's start with the disclaimers, as always. My opinions represent my very limited knowledge and experience. And certainly, this is not going to be inclusive. There are so many more experiences out there that I don't know about, and I'd be happy to hear them in the comment section. So likely I'm going to share things that may not fit your context. Second, as an adult who I would consider myself almost middle-aged, I am not interested in whatever grown consenting adults choose to do, whether in public or in their private spaces. I could not care less. So whatever you choose to do, as we say, do you, boo. So I am not interested in placing any value judgment on anything that folks do. If you choose whatever lifestyle, I could not care less. As long as in my mind there's no harm done to anybody, you do whatever works for you. I really don't care. And relatedly, I'm really not interested in assigning value on people's choices, especially when it comes to social issues. And so, if I ever advocate for one position that may be different than yours, it does not mean that I'm placing any less value on yours. I'm simply talking about what works for me. So, if my choice is different than yours, and I'm talking about mine, I don't want you to feel like I'm denigrating yours. No, those are two separate ideas. Whatever works for me works for me. Whatever works for you, I hope works for you. So your lifestyle is just as valid as mine. It may not be my choice, but yes, it's just as valid as mine. So, like I said, I don't really care what grown consenting adults do in their own space at their own time. I really don't care. So that said, many folks who are not African may not know this, but actually polygamy is fairly present among Kenyan Americans. Sometimes on purpose, and other times it happens, quote unquote, by accident. And I'm going to explain to you what I mean by that. Now, and I hope many of you already know that polygamy is actually a crime in America and many Western societies. And not because it's universally accepted. Those are just values that people just decided to assign. But in Kenya, polygamy is perfectly legal. In Kenya, you can have as many wives as you desire. The one issue that keeps popping up is some of the women I talk to, especially those who are not born in Kenya, will always ask, if men are allowed to bring additional wives, then why not allow women to do the same? I don't have an answer to that. That's something you're going to have to take up with Kenyan folks. But yes, polygamy is very much legal in Kenya. So there are people in my circle who actually desire to have more wives. And they go for it either publicly or in ways that are maybe less obvious. For example, I know people in my circle who will introduce their soon-to-be second wives or third wives to their families, to their existing wives and things like that. Yeah, the folks will be like, yeah, this is the new person coming in, this is your NX, and let's figure this out. There are many other folks who are caught prematurely with co-wife candidates. I think this is a much more common scenario than the first, where something starts on the side and next thing they know it, information spreads around before they're ready to talk about it. And then there's a third group too, where others, this group of folks almost never got caught until the day they are getting buried. On the funeral day, that's when the co-wife shows up and says, hey, here I am. I've got 2 kids. We've been together for however many years, and nobody, quote unquote, knew. That happens quite a bit. So if you attend Kenyan funerals, I promise you, one of these days you might run into those. And many folks actually, I would say, again, find themselves accidentally, quote unquote, sliding into polygamy. And I'll give you 3 scenarios that I've seen. One, I've got friends who had some kind of entanglement, had a child with a woman, they lived together. And at some point, things progressed. Then they broke up. And then this young man possibly moves on to the next relationship. Then the older relationship comes back. So then you've got 2 women, and in many cases, kids are involved in both directions. So I've got friends of mine who never planned to be polygamous, but this is what happened. I had a girlfriend, things progressed. They took cows to the quote-unquote girlfriend's home, which in Kenya and in my culture, once the family accepts cows, that becomes your wife. So then they break up and then somebody shows up, and so you find yourself between 2 women. That happens quite a bit amongst some of my friends. And then, of course, you have the case where somebody gets legally married to a woman, and then at some point, it turns out that the woman they're married to is not well liked by the family, and the family introduces another person in between. And the guy somehow seemed to entertain that. So I've seen men caught up between 2 wives. One, the one they chose, and then one that was introduced by the family, and they can't go either way. So they choose to move forward with both women. The third scenario, again, where marriage happens, people separate, and then before formal divorce happens, the man enters new entanglement. And then kids happen, and so folks find themselves in between more than one wife. So these are some of the examples that I say would be classified as quote unquote accidentally sliding into polygamy. And just so you know, many Kenyan Americans, as I said earlier, come from polygamous family. And many of us who come from polygamous family, it's in the sense that it is our grandparents or our great grandparents that had multiple wives. So, and that includes myself, as I said. My maternal grandfather had at least 3 wives that we know. I hear there could have been many, many more entanglements. But yes, he had 3 wives. 2 of them are still alive. My grandmother, my first grandmother is the first one. Then I have a second grandmother. There's a third one that had passed. And so I'm fairly familiar, intimately familiar with those kinds of union. Now, in my father's generation, I think there's only one uncle of mine who is in such a union. But yeah, so these things are not really strange for many of us. So what I would say is that a significant number of Kenyan Americans have very intimate understanding of polygamy, mostly through personal experiences. What that means is that when polygamy arrives, at least for many of us, planned or not, it's not one of those things that I would describe as a world-ending event, as it would be for folks raised in the West. So when it happens to maybe a friend or to people you know, you're like, oh, okay. I mean, I've seen that. And surprisingly, of course, there are women in our circles that are fairly comfortable with polygamy, especially the ones who join in as second or third or fourth wives. Amongst Kenyan American women, I know quite a few people who are very open to the idea of polygamy. They have less judgment about things like that, and they can make it work. Now, as a result, some of these unions actually appear very successful from the outside, or because I've seen 2 scenarios: polygamous marriages within Kenyan American families that seem to do really well, at least from an outsider perspective, seem to do really well. But also, unfortunately, while there are narratives about successful polygamous marriages, it's almost always the case that all we hear about polygamy is that it's terrible, stay away from it. I don't think that narrative is entirely accurate. I see problems in both monogamous relationship just as much as there are in polygamous relationship. So I can't even tell you which has less problem than the other. Certainly there are problems that are very unique to polygamous relationship, just as there are very specific problems you can only expect in monogamous relationships. So either way, I have seen good and bad in either cases. So again, just to remind you again, legally in America, this can be quite challenging because, for one, because the law does not recognize anything beyond a wife number one. It often means that the second spouse is not recognized, and of course cannot claim many of the benefits that we can expect with marriage, like when it comes to taxes, when it comes to healthcare and things like that. So in America, I know that option is complicated, and typically what I've seen folks do is that when a person has more than one wife, they don't sign paperwork with the second or the subsequent wives. And so they just live together, cohabitate, whatever arrangement that works for them, but legally they don't sign paperwork. Because otherwise, if you sign paperwork, you can be charged with bigamy. And that's a very serious crime in America. In Kenya, there's nothing wrong with that. And I'm assuming, maybe folks who are familiar with this can tell us, I assume that because polygamy is legal in Kenya, the third or the fourth or the subsequent wife can claim the benefits in the same way as a first wife. I don't know anything about that, but maybe people who are more educated on that can help us with that. So what I would say is that for many folks, polygamy is actually an opportunity to access companionship in ways that are not always available to women who would register as quote-unquote non-traditional candidates for marriage. And I'm only saying this based on what I hear from the people in my circle. That the people who are saying, like, I don't see myself as a traditional candidate for marriage. And if polygamy offers me a way to access companionship in a way that is satisfying, then why not? I never had to think about it that way until I listened to one friend of mine explain it in that sense. So I'm like, okay, well, if it works for you, hey, you do you. The second explanation that I've also gotten from people who are in polygamous relationships is that for others, polygamy really is the result of a series of events beyond their control. But when it arrives, when they look at their options, they just decide, I just need to accept it and make the best of it. Then the third explanation that I hear, especially from men, is that some men actually consciously enter into polygamous relationship because they have certain needs that are not fulfilled in monogamous relationship. And so they see polygamy as a way of fulfilling whatever the needs are. And if you know what that is, you can explain. But I hear sometimes it's just a matter of companionship. Sometimes it's differences in libido and things like that. So there are many, many reasons. But often it appears that there are certain needs that are not fulfilled in monogamous relationship. And so polygamy becomes the answer to all of that. But as I've said in the past and I keep repeating, whatever your choice, do you. I know polygamy works for some people, but I've also seen spectacular failures in polygamy. So whatever your choice, that is up to you. Many people that I've talked to within my circles actually never planned or never imagined they would be in polygamous relationship. In fact, I would dare to say that the majority of people I've talked to who are currently in polygamous relationship will say that they never imagined themselves in polygamous relationship. In fact, some of them were very judgmental about this sort of unions until life came knocking. And so if it's not your desire, I hope you don't get there. But if it is your desire, I hope you find an option that works for you. So as I would say in karating, that if life throws you mapera, you need to learn how to make mapera red. So if that's what you find yourself with, I hope you find a way to make it work. So good luck, folks, and I wish you well with whatever choice you make. It's your life. I could not care less, and I hope people don't care. Do what works for you. Well, thank you, folks, for listening, and I will see you in the next. Bye.